My why in life that I apply to how I parent, how I coach, how I interact with friends, etc., is essentially the more personal responsibility we take in any situation, any relationship, the more satisfied we're going to be with the ultimate outcome. If we expect others or other circumstances to dictate how things are going to go, we're only going to be left disappointed.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad podcast. Today, I am super excited to talk to Jerry Tavella, dad, entrepreneur, finance guy for sure. Looking forward to really digging into a lot of that stuff on his past, his family, his business. So I can't wait to have a good conversation. For those of you who heard Paul Malella, his podcast, Jerry was referred to me by Paul. So I'm looking forward to kind of chatting down this similar paths as we did with Paul. So, Jerry, let me hand it over to you. Can you please introduce yourself? Tell us about your family and your business.
Adam, thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today. I've been looking forward to this. A little bit about who I am. Grew up in Connecticut, Southwest Connecticut, Norwalk, Connecticut. Very blue collar family. Father that had his own business. Worked hard as a general contractor, mostly small residential remodeling, some spec building, but not a whole lot. Got burned in the 80s and played it real conservative after that. So very, middle class family. My mom worked in the guidance department in high school my entire life. I have an older half sister, a younger sister, all very close. Stay in pretty much close contact with all of them. We were together on vacation just last week in South Carolina, and probably not too far from you, Adam, in Hilton Head. My upbringing was very family oriented, pretty close knit. Played a lot of youth sports. Played hockey. Mostly hockey was my number one love. Football was my father's love. So I didn't get that gene from him, but he coached me, and that was a big part of who I am and who I still am. And I hope we have an opportunity to expand on that today. I'm a father of two kids. My daughter's 14. My son is 10. My wife, Laura, we've been married for 17 years. It's been 16 years. It will be 17 this October. We met shortly after college. We live in Fairfield, Connecticut. And I built a financial planning practice and a pretty large financial services team out of Westchester in New York City for the first 18 years or so of my career. And the last two, I've been serving as the principal and general agent of our parent company. So now I'm responsible for the growth and development of about 180 advisors that oversee thousands of clients, about $10 billion in assets, and do a pretty substantial amount of insurance work every single year as well. So got my hands on a lot of different things, a little bit of real estate, although not nearly as much as you or some of your guests. I own a commercial property, a residential rental property, and that's always been a passion and interest of mine as well.
Oh, I love me some real estate, so happy to chat about that anytime, on here or not. I'm happy to chat real estate. So, all right, I love it. Yeah, and you're I think it says in the notes here, October 20th is going to be your anniversary, right?
17 years, October 20th. Yep.
All right. My parents are October 18th, so 2 days, but it's been a couple more years than 17 for them. So they've been doing this for a long daggum time. So, but no, speaking of parents, though, and you mentioned your dad, I'd love to dig into your dad, your background a little bit more, growing up, like what it was like in your family. Tell me a little bit more about your dad. Let's get into kind of some nitty gritty, what it was like to have him as a father. Maybe even if you know about his dad, what he's told you about his dad and what it was like for him growing up.
I was very fortunate when you asked if I knew his father. I knew both my grandfathers, awesome. And they both played a pretty instrumental role in my life growing up. I had the I'll get to my father, but I had the opportunity of playing golf with my father and my son just last week in Hilton Head.
Nice.
And it was a pretty excellent experience. And I can remember on my 10th birthday playing golf with my dad and my two grandfathers, kind of the perfect foursome. So yeah, my dad, special man, both my grandfathers, really special, both entrepreneurs also. Both my grandfathers, my dad's dad started the business that my father ran with his brother for many years, their contracting business. And my mother's father started. He was a glazer and built a pretty successful glass business, doing a lot of commercial curtain wall things like that in the community. And that business is still around today, long after his passing. That my cousin and my uncle run. So I guess, as you asked me to talk about it, kind of surrounded by entrepreneurs and business owners, which is interesting. I hadn't put a lot of thought into that in the past with respect to my grandfathers. But my dad is a special human being. He turned 70 yesterday.
Nice.
So
Happy birthday.
We had the opportunity to celebrate his 70th birthday all week last week together as a family while we were on vacation, and we'll celebrate again this weekend. My dad is somebody who was probably most instrumental in instilling confidence in me and who I was. He was somebody who really had a tremendous amount of self-belief, and really, shared that with me and my sisters, to give us confidence in the fact that we could tackle any challenge, any problem, and become whatever it is that our dreams and hearts, desired. He was not somebody that I think was not, somebody who you would look at and say, was so wildly successful as a business person. But as a father, I was actually listening to one of your podcasts that you did just a few sessions ago. He was absolutely $1 billion father with very little money. I think that was the title of one of your podcasts, How to Be a $1 Billion Father with Zero Money, or that it requires zero money. I mean, that's a perfect explanation and description of who my father is. He was the father that was always around at field day at school. He coached all the little league teams. He helped out with my hockey team, even though he couldn't skate. He was the parent manager, making sure that everything kind of ran smoothly, scheduling games. He never missed a practice, never missed a game, would create opportunity for us to, practice our sports in the backyard with him after work and after school every single day. And would just give of his time and continues to give of his time to this day. Because that's giving of himself is what he has to give, and he gives it whenever possible. So really, really special human being.
Wow, that is phenomenal to hear. That's it. I've said this, I think, just a couple podcast recordings ago, because by the time this comes out, it's going to be like a couple months. But just a couple podcast recordings ago, I was chatting with somebody and basically saying that I hear so many, especially in my military career and all of that, I hear so many horror stories about people's dads and the terrible experiences they have. So it's such a refreshing change when I hear things like this, where it's like, man, my dad was involved in everything. He was doing all this stuff. Like, it was, it's always nice to see, especially when you look at the beginning of you saying, growing up very middle class, doing what he was doing as a contractor, but he still made sure that there was time that he set aside to, be an involved dad. So it sounds like that he probably learned some of that from his dad, because your grandfather seems to be rather involved already, was already involved in your life and whatnot. So, did he talk to you about what he took from his dad that he kind of imprinted on you, or was that just something that he just showed rather than talk to you about?
I think probably more showed than, my father was more of a, lead by example than maybe, a storyteller, if you will. But I sense that they had a very similar relationship. My father was the youngest of three kids, so he had an older brother. And I got to grow up watching, how tight-knit their family was, as well. So my grandfather was always around. My grandfather, I think about a couple memories. I can remember hitting my first home run in Little League, and he was the one that was in the woods finding the baseball. My grandfather was around for my games, just like my father was always around for my games, and my father's around for all my kids' games. That's today. Awesome. That's always been, the favorite pastime of the family is filling the calendar up with kids and grandkids sporting events so that we can watch them excel and have fun.
That's right. Yeah. I and this is not at all to dig on my father, but I mean, he was almost never at any of my games. He often worked swings or nights. So he was sleeping anytime that I was off doing a game or anything like that, or maybe he was at his second job or whatever it was, But now, I'm caddying for my son for his golf matches and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, I absolutely love being involved in it and seeing all the stuff. And I'm not sure my dad, other than golf, he watches football. I don't know about playing anything. Like, I don't know. Besides golf, I couldn't imagine, honestly, watching my dad try to hit a baseball. He used to, I guess, play softball when he was in the Air Force, but he busted his shoulder. He talks about like throwing this massively waterlogged softball, and it like ripped his shoulder out, and he's hasn't thrown anything since. We never played catch for those reasons. Like his shoulder was so jacked up. But sports has a tendency. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think about my grandfather, you mentioned the Air Force. He was a boxer in the Air Force, during and right after World War II. And I can remember hearing the stories of his amateur boxing career, which was pretty cool. And my father, I guess, a quick story about my dad who says a lot about who he is. My father, I'm just 6 foot, couple 100 pounds, maybe a little bit more these days, unfortunately. My dad is a smaller guy, probably 5'8", 5'7.5", 5'8's probably a stretch, 165 pounds soaking wet. I think I got a lot of the size from my mom's side of the family. Her dad and brothers were all big guys. But my father was an all-state middle linebacker in high school at that stature. And
Nice.
and I can remember growing up and seeing, we kept like a trophy case in the basement, and there was a picture of his all-state squad that got together for a photo, and he was standing in the back row on 2 cinder blocks. So that was when I talk about confidence and who we are, and the belief that we have in ourselves. My father was always a mind over matter guy, and if you don't mind, it don't matter. And never let size, never let, conditions ever hold him back. And he busted his butt. And I think I have a lot of him. I would like to think that I have some of him in me that's helped me be successful in some different areas of my life.
How, as you were growing up, how did he impress that upon you to have that self-confidence, to have that mind over matter thought process? I'm going through trying to teach myself how to do some of this right now. For me, I was not very good at that at a younger age, and I still struggle with it internally. Some of the mind over matter stuff. So passing it on to my it's hard when it's something you personally struggle with, right? So I want to toss over to you. Like, how is it that your dad talked to you about it, and then what lessons? I'll just pause there. I'll ask my second part after that.
I think it's always been with my father, and I try to do the same. Lead by example, if you will. I'll tell you another funny story about my father that everybody in the community that we grew up in was kind of familiar with. He was a football guy. I already told you that. He played middle linebacker in high school and for about a semester in college. But he was a little bit of a legend in the touch football league in our community growing up. And I can remember going to watch him as a kid. I'd be 5, 6, 7 years old and go watch his games. And he was always the leader. He always kind of instilled or always carried those captain-like leadership, values and that position on the field. But I can remember watching him in his playoff games, in his touch football playoff games. He was a pass rusher, and it'd be late November, December, frost on the ground, snow coming down, and he would always play with no shirt on. And the guys in the league and around town thought he was nuts, right? But he said, "Listen, if I'm not wearing a shirt, they can't hold me, and I can get to the quarterback." And he would stand on the sideline. It'd be freezing, and he would stand on the sideline in just shorts. And I can remember him saying to us, if you don't mind, it don't matter. And that was, something that, I'll always remember, looking at him and thinking about him as a kid, looking up to him. So he led by example. And I can think of other instances where if we were in a situation that seemed threatening or unsafe or otherwise, he would always jokingly say, nothing's going to happen to me, and you're with me. So what are you worried about, right? So, that was a message that I can hear that he repeated over and over and over again. That gave us a certain level of confidence and comfort. We were around him, and that continues today. He's a calming influence. He's a confidence building influence, just because of who he is and how he's always kind of acted.
That's awesome. And you kind of alluded to it at the beginning, but you were bringing out the question I was going to ask, which was, how is it that you applied what you learned that he was passing on to you? how do you apply that now as a dad with your son and your daughter?
I still try to lead by example, as much as possible, and help. I try to verbalize it more. I mean, in my professional career and the things that I've been exposed to, different coaches. You had Paul Malella on as a guest. He's been my coach for the last 7 years or so. So I've been exposed to more exercises that have given me confidence to vocalize and help my kids expand their view of possibilities, more so than I think my father and my mother, ever really had exposure to. So I do try to vocalize it, but like my father, I try to lead by example, as much as possible. My kids see me get up, 2 mornings a week before work to go to the gym. They see my wife do the same thing. They don't see it. Hopefully they're sleeping, but they're aware of it. Right. I still play, adult hockey. I want my kids to know that, these sports that they're engaged with and having fun with are something that they can do forever. So even when I don't really want to go play adult hockey at 10 o'clock at night on a Tuesday, I do it because I'm committed to it. So I think the best thing we can do for our kids is kind of lead by example, and then try to coach them up, with confidence and just some different language and different exercises, I guess, when we can.
Different exercises. What is that? What kind of different exercises do you mean there?
Well, I just mean helping them kind of, talk through what's possible, right? And visualize ideal outcomes.
Okay.
Again, I'm going to refer back to Paul Malella for a second because he's been so instrumental in my professional development. But Paul and I always work on experiencing dimensional success and having successes outside of work, but also with relationships and health and family as well. But Paul has been a big proponent of visualizing outcomes long before they occur, right? So we do that with our kids, right? We have those conversations with our kids all the time as they enter in a new season or a new year at school, right? Or a new sports season. Like if everything goes really well, like what does this look like at the end? For you, I do it with clients also. I do it with clients financially, and I talk about if we were getting together 3 years from now, what has to have happened for you to feel really good about the progress you've made personally, professionally, financially, paint a vision and then help them work towards it. I think we use that same exercise and that same conversation all the time in shorter time frames with people I'm coaching at work or with my kids, right? If we're getting together at the end of the season or at the end of this tournament, what has to have happened for you to feel really good about how it went, right? The relationships that you developed, the friendships that you made, the outcome on the field, right? Like what does a great outcome look like? And then help them visualize it. And I think when we visualize things, we increase, when we can visualize a positive outcome, we increase the possibility or likelihood that it can occur.
Tell me the last time or the time that strikes your brain the most that you had that conversation with one of your kids. The visualization, especially when it comes to sports, because I think that matches perfectly with where kids are right now. I mean, they're not thinking, oh yeah, 3 years from now when I'm applying for college. Like, but when it comes to sports, like what is that conversation? Walk me through what that conversation has looked like.
Well, I would think, we've expanded on a conversation recently, and we are expanding on this conversation regularly with my daughter, who has committed herself quite a bit to playing soccer at a pretty, competitive level. And she had a coach that did an exercise with her a couple years ago around what her 2 and 3 and 4 year goals were with soccer. And really the pivot point in her soccer journey was around what high school soccer might look like when she was a freshman. And she's in 8th grade right now and completing her club soccer, not completing her sub soccer career, but kind of near the end. High school will be next year. And her goal has been for a long time to make the JV team as a freshman, right? I think she's got, a chance of doing even better than that. But that's been kind of her benchmark goal for a while. And we help her kind of visualize that, right? Like, who are the girls that are going to be on the team? What does practice look like? Are you traveling? Are you dressing for the varsity games periodically? And I think if we can kind of really talk through that and get her to appreciate and visualize and be able to explain what that would look like, I think it just increases, the possibility that she can be successful in that short-term goal.
No, I absolutely love that. Yeah, and that's one of the things I love to talk about here is the balance between being an entrepreneur and being a dad. You can totally pull a lot of stuff because we have, 3-year visions for our, 3-year pictures for our company. We have 10-year visions for where we want to be. We have all of the, all these, core focuses and all this stuff. I use EOS, so using EOS language, but all of the stuff that we apply. And then it's like, okay, why don't we do that with our family? Why don't we do that with our kids? Why don't we help them figure out what a vision is, all this stuff. And it's funny, yesterday, I'm going to pull the sheet over. Yesterday, going around, so I'm in a group called GoBundance, and it's a bunch of entrepreneurs and business owners and folks trying to become, I forgot the tagline, something like a healthy, wealthy tribe type of thing, right? Where you're trying to be better in your marriage, better in your business, better in your family, all this stuff. So one of the things, but going around is this little chart here for kids. So it's a growth mindset chart that my son just put right in front of him. He does his homeschool right here in the office with me, and he's like, "I'm going to put this up here because I think I'm going to need it to remind me once in a while, Dad." And I said, "You absolutely do that." I printed it off, and it's instead of thinking I can't do it, think this: I'm still learning. I'll trying, and it goes, it's not good enough, and then think this: is this the best I can do? And if it's not the best you can do, then you're right, it's not good enough. So let's do harder. Let's do the best we could do. If it is the best you could do, then what the heck else can I ask for? It's the best you could do. Like, I don't, trying to teach our kids to so I want to do that same thing with the visualization side, because golf is his passion. He loves golf. My 5-year-old is a fan as well, but he's 5, still working on trying to figure out if he wants to golf. Where his 9-year-old brother is out doing competitions every weekend. He's on multiple different leagues and doing all sorts of stuff. And I'm looking forward to watching how this goes. But man, oh man, does he get into his head, and it's tough. So I'm going to selfishly ask a question. I know you mentioned that your son golfs and your daughter obviously is rather good at soccer. So have you had to walk through, and I'm going to assume the answer to this is yes, but walk through times where they had a lot of self-doubt in what they were doing, and where they were just, hey, I'm terrible at this, or I'm the worst soccer player, the worst golfer, the worst, pick your sport. And how did you kind of work through that as a dad?
Look, it certainly comes up. My son, I played golf. My son is just starting to play golf. So yes, we played golf last weekend, but he's not a golfer. His passions are hockey and lacrosse. And he also plays a little bit of soccer. But look, when they get frustrated, the only thing that I think we can speak to or what can we control, right? We can control our attitude. We can control our effort, right? So really that's what we harp on in our house, right? We're not too worried about the mistakes, the goals against, the lack of goals for, the errant passes, whether it's on a soccer field or, whatever it might be. We're focusing on effort. If you gave it the best you possibly could, if you showed up, if you brought your energy and the right attitude, and the right effort, then that's all we can ask for, right? And I think that's where those conversations, exist mostly when our kids are frustrated with any of their activities. Did you give it the best you can? And if you give it the best effort you possibly could have, then that's all anybody can ask for, and that's all you can ask for of yourself. Well, even if it's a bad, a tough grade on a quiz, right? Well, did you study? Did you put in the effort? If not, then yeah, you should be, disappointed and discouraged, right? But if you gave it your best effort, then we'll get them next time. Yeah,
and that part is I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that's a crucial part of the conversation of, okay, well, did you actually study? Because if you didn't, well, then yeah, be angry.
Okay.
But be angry at yourself, right? Like let's figure out how we could have done better, right? And it's the same thing. I try to talk about golf. I said, okay, well, what have you done this week to get better at golf? Was I don't want to take away your fact that you're swimming in the swimming pool. I want you to go and do that. But did that help you get better at golf? Did watching that one extra DIY science episode help you get better at golf? I mean, it's great. It's helped out with homeschool, but there's certain things you're doing. Like what are we doing that is helping and not helping?
And that's one of our biggest struggles as parents. And I don't know if you experienced it as well. Like you, as an adult, having been through the sport. Like my wife played Division I college soccer, and now my daughter's a good soccer player, and I played club hockey in college, and I think we have a good idea of what they can be doing to get better, but you don't want to force it either, right? Like you want them to self-discover, and we can create an environment and give them the tools and give them if they want it, if they ask for it, right? We don't want to push either. So it's like it's a tricky balance that we deal with all the time in our house. And I'm sure you do too, around encouraging, pushing, driving, whatever it might be. Like, we just want them to, what's the right language? We want them, to just live up, to just get to their potential, right? If you've got the potential, because wasted potential is frustrating to me, right? Mm-hmm. But if you put in the work and get out of it what you should get out of it, then we don't need anybody going to the NHL or playing for the women's national soccer team. That's not the goal. The goal is just to do the best you possibly can. And trying to figure out the right balance there is always tricky.
Yeah, and I think it's tough too, because I look at my past all the time and think to myself where I failed miserably, on where I could have applied myself a lot better and what I could have been doing. And I don't want to put those could-haves on my sons or soon-to-be daughter. My daughter, her birthday is today as we're recording this, right? So her first birthday, right? So I'm not going to put that on her. But at the same point, it's like I want to encourage you to not have those feelings later on in life of like, what could I have done had I applied myself? What could I have done had I done all these things? Because you don't want to be stuck in the could-haves, on where you could have been had we not, pushed you certain ways. But I also want to let my kids be kids, like the oldest kid is 9, right? There's no, again, you're not joining the PGA next year. Like, that's not where we're at, right? So like, I don't need to pressure you to do it. So let's just go and have fun, But he's like, hey, I want to win medals. I'm like, well, if you want to win medals, that's a different world than just going out and having fun with your dad or your friends, So,
my father, back to my dad for a second, I can remember he would create the opportunity in the backyard for us to do the work if we wanted to do the work. And he would encourage. I don't think he ever pushed. He definitely made himself available to support, right? So when baseball was not my number one sport, but when I was pitching, if, he would go out there and play catcher, for me for 100 pitches in the afternoon if I need to work on hitting the strike zone. And I can remember in the backyard, he built a little backstop with the tire and took my paper route bag and my old paper route bag and the canvas bag and stapled it to the back of the tire. So when he wasn't around, I had a place to pitch to and collect the balls if I pitched a strike. I can remember when I was playing football, and he was a great tackler. I wasn't initially, and he took a heavy bag. We had a sandbox in the backyard that had, that he had built, a 2x12 with swings hanging from it, got rid of the swings and basically made a pulley system in the backyard with this heavy bag that we would tackle that had weights on the other end that you drove, and the weights came up on the other side. And he would do all those things and get creative for us to put in the work when we wanted to put in the work. He even built a rink in our backyard. And he was not a skater, but he created a nice sheet of ice in the backyard for me to skate on in all really inexpensive ways. I mean, today, these kids, for all these they've got private coaches and private skill sessions in every sport all day long if they want them. But back then, that wasn't really a thing. Sports were not as big of a business as they are today.
Yeah,
so he created, ways for us to put in work in the backyard if we wanted to. And I don't recall him. I can remember him. I'd be home from school, he'd come home from work and say, did you throw any pitches today? I can remember those conversations, but it was never overbearing or forceful, if you will. So we try to do the same thing with our kids. The shooting area for my son's hockey is in the basement. My daughter's got all the different bounce backs and stuff like that for soccer in the backyard. And, we'll encourage without pushing, and they take us up on it when they want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a golf net in the backyard, and you're reminding me that I need to put a new one up. We had a big windstorm came in and ripped it apart. So I no longer have a golf net in the backyard, but I want to build a simulator in my garage. So we'll see how that goes. Nice. I want to build a nice golf simulator for him. Of course, it is totally for him. The golf simulator, absolutely for him. All right. So I want to go into the business side a little. Well, no, before I get to the business side, I'm trying to track on how you got to doing what you're doing. So
sure.
You mentioned, playing sports in high school and then into college. Kind of what did you go to college for? How did you get involved in doing what you're doing right now with on the wealth strategy side?
Sure. I was the first one in my family, even extended family. I think I had one cousin that had gone to college ahead of me. So I was really one of the first, first guys in the family to go to college. And my parents just wanted to get me into college. They wanted to see me go to college. Neither of them, graduated from college. So I didn't really have I didn't have a great vision or clear vision in terms of what I wanted to do. I always say that my view of possibilities was rather limited as a kid because while my father was always there and he was encouraging, he was a contractor. All his buddies were in the trades. Everybody I knew was either in the trades or worked in the school system. And that was really all I knew. I didn't know any real estate guys. I didn't know any doctors or ad sales guys or attorneys. Like that just was not my community. Right. So I went to college. And I decided, because I loved coaching, I loved being around sports, and I loved my father's schedule, but I didn't want to break my back the way he did as a contractor. Yeah. I was like, I'll go be a teacher, right? So my intention when I went to college was to be a U.S. history teacher. That was the class in school that I enjoyed the most. And I was like, this will be great. I'll be a U.S. history teacher. I'll coach high school hockey if everything goes according to plan. And that'll be my life. So I went to Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, with the intention of playing club hockey and graduating to be a U.S. history teacher. And I don't know what clicked. I don't remember the moment it clicked, but somewhere towards the end of my freshman year, I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't want to go to high school for the rest of my life, right? Maybe there's something else out there. And maybe it was just because I got out of my community and I started to meet people who had exposure to different, careers, different opportunities, et cetera. Without clear direction, I switched my major to business administration with a concentration in finance. And that's all it meant to me. It did not mean a path in wealth management. It did not mean a path towards anything. It was just, I'll do business administration with a concentration in finance. And I got a minor in accounting, but I was not the best student. I was there to play hockey, right? I was there to play hockey and have some fun. My parents did not know to push me towards internships or anything like that. So I graduated pretty unprepared to do anything with my financial degree. And I did not have a job right out of college. So I spent that summer working for my father. And while he was happy to have me around, I'm pretty sure that him and his brother, who was his business partner, made my life awful intentionally so that I'd go out and try to use, my degree. I can remember just being on some pretty awful job sites, doing things that were absolutely miserable, right? While they had a lull to get roofing shingles up to the roof, they'd have me carry them, right? Because I was the low man on the totem pole. So that was a pretty tough summer. And at the end of that summer, I said, I'll try to get a job in finance, right? And I did not know what that meant. I think the job board back then was monster.com. This was 2004. So I was on monster.com looking for opportunities. I can remember taking the train into New York City and interviewing with what today I would call boiler room, chop shops where they'd say, yeah, you can have a job, but you're going to make 600 dials a day. And you'll be lucky if you get a client. I was very, very fortunate so I really feel like my whole professional life happened by complete chance. I was playing in a charity golf outing with my dad and my uncle and my cousin who I worked with. This was in September of 2004. And I walked into the halfway house to use the men's room after probably having a few beers on the front nine at the same time as an advisor affiliated with our firm walked in. And I knew him a little bit. I knew him through the hockey community. I had played in some adult hockey games with him and his brother. This is a guy who was 15 years my senior, so we didn't really have a relationship, but we happened to be going to the bathroom at the same time, standing next to each other. And we knew each other well enough for him to say, "Hey, Jerry, what are you up to?" And I had enough beers where I looked at him and said, "I'm looking for a job in finance." I had the confidence to kind of, market myself. And he said, "Come see me at dinner." And, I'd love to tell you a little bit about our firm and connect you with someone who was the hiring manager at the time. So I did. And long story short, that's the only job I've ever had after college. I joined that firm just a few months later. And I was given the opportunity to build a wealth management business. Again, whatever the heck that meant. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. I'm 22 years old. Building a wealth management practice sounded good, but I didn't really know what it meant. But what I was told it could mean was really attractive to me. I was told it's a very entrepreneurial business. It can become a lifestyle business where you'll have control. You'll have the ability to design who you work with, when you work, where you work, etc. And all of those things really appealed to me because of what I was exposed to by my father being a business owner, right? Mm-hmm. My father had the ability to be around, to be at field day, to go on field trips, to coach Little League, to not miss a game or a practice. And I can remember having conversations with the gentleman who was interviewing me, saying that if you build a wealth management practice, you'll have those same flexibilities. You'll be able to coach. You'll be able to, be around. You'll be able to prioritize your family, et cetera. So I said, sure, sign me up. What I didn't appreciate yet is that the career also came with, it could be very rewarding financially as well and give me opportunities and exposure to things that I never even dreamt, were possible at 22 years old. But that's ultimately kind of how things, played out in a way that truly, dramatically exceeded, my expectations. But I want to, reemphasize that I took this opportunity because it gave me the opportunity to have a life like the life that my father lived, being around, being an entrepreneur, owning his own business. But this career, came a little bit more, financial upside, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you at least had that vision of where you wanted to go. You may not have known that that was a vision of where you wanted to go, but you understood kind of what it could build out. I'm interested, because you said that literally just in the bathroom, I'm looking for a job in finance, right? And one of the things we talk about a lot in the education company in ADPI, one of the companies I help run, is we tell people all the time, you're one relationship away from a life-changing experience, right? Like all it takes is one conversation, one relationship, one connection from something life-changing. And all too often, we will sabotage ourselves by saying, "Oh, and I'm speaking to myself." For anybody listening, I'm totally speaking to myself in here. I sabotage myself constantly on this. We'll sabotage ourselves by saying, "Oh, no, I don't think that's the right. I shouldn't say this, or I shouldn't say that, or I don't want to sound this, or I don't want to sound that, or I don't want to come across this way." Or it's just no, like just say something. And and there's boy, this is bringing on multiple different angles I'd love to take with this, but. Have your kids ever heard that story before about the start of your career?
I'm not sure. I can't honestly say yes or no. They might have overheard it. I don't know if I've deliberately shared it with them. But as you just said what you said around how maybe we are all too often shy, coy, lack confidence, we don't put ourselves in a position for these life-changing events to occur. Mm-hmm. And that I think I tried to say it without saying it. I probably only said it the way I did and promoted myself in that moment because I was feeling a little bit loose. I'd had a couple, beers on the golf course with my dad, which is unfortunate, right? Because we should all be that way all the time. We should all be confident. We should all be, willing, we have to be our own best advocate, right? But in that moment, I said, yeah, I'm, just graduated looking for a career or a job in finance or financial services. And it was life-changing, and it was so by chance. I mean, I did not know that individual well enough that this ever would have come up with him, this opportunity, had we not crossed paths at that exact moment in time on that random Monday golf tournament in 2004. And I think it's a great lesson to share it with the kids.
For sure. And as you were saying it, I think I'd love to share how I kind of got connected with some of the people I got connected with and the relationships that we've built. And, you actually jumped on something that was one of the angles of my brain I wanted to take with this is, I tell people all the time, so my wife is half Cuban and half Spanish, right? So her mom was born and raised in Cuba. Her dad was born and raised in Spain. So I speak some Spanish, and I tell people all the time, it's like I speak a lot more Spanish when I've had a whiskey or two, right? Because I don't worry about what other people think about me. But that shows that I actually know the Spanish. It's there, right? You actually have it inside of you to have those conversations. You had it inside of you without the alcohol. It's there. You have the ability to have those conversations. We just are too afraid of what other people are going to think about what we say or what we do or how we act or how I pronounce my Spanish words. That's, we'll use something like alcohol to get us through those situations. We don't maybe necessarily think that we're doing it to get through the situations. And sometimes I'm by no means saying that people shouldn't sit down and have a beer or sit down and have a whiskey. I'll probably have whiskey tonight, right? But what I am saying is we can't use that as a reason, a coping mechanism, a thing to get us through these conversations. And that's one of the reasons I would like. I think you should share that story with your kids. Is like, man, I this one conversation has affected like the fact that now we were able to go golf in Hilton Head last week, right? That wouldn't have happened had I not had this conversation, right? Like the house you live in, the fact that you're in travel hockey and soccer, like none of these things would be possible if it wasn't for that conversation. And what a lesson for the kids to be able to hear and learn. And like, to me, it's hard though, because it's one of those things that I feel like it's impactful coming from here, from, the years of trial and error that, you and I have gone through and the wisdom that we have from our life experience. I'm hoping it would hit the same way when I talk to my 9-year-old about what that actually looks like. But who knows how it's going to hit a 9-year-old's ears, but hopefully it hits the right way.
Yeah. I mean, my son's 10, my daughter's 14, she's, I think, starting to appreciate some more of the lessons and the things that we talk about, maybe, but she's 14. She's in 8th grade, like you said, you worry about how you sound, which is why you don't use the Spanish. Nobody would ever think twice about it right after it happened. Right. And that's a really hard thing to teach kids, right? Yeah. Like we worry about, what people think of us and what we look like and how we dress and as soon as the moment's over, nobody's thinking about it except us. Right. And how do you teach a kid that? That's hard. Because I'm, 41 years, into this gig, and I still haven't figured that out entirely.
Yeah. I should ask my son, hey, do you remember the bad shot that, little Johnny had last week on number 3? Oh, you don't? You don't remember that? Yeah, he doesn't remember your bad shot either. Like, Johnny doesn't care about your bad shot. Like, you're the only one that cares. Like, that's it. Nobody else cares. Exactly. They may care that, not that my son has done this, but they may care that you threw your club across the fairway. They're going to remember that because that's complete misbehavior. But they're not going to remember the fact that you had a bad shot. But they're going to remember that comeback you had when you put your brain to it and you start working. And they're like, wow, that kid shot 2-3 birdies in a row. And it was awesome to watch. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But again, the beauty of the lenses that we have to be able to look at life through versus, theirs. And it's hard to translate that over to them. What do your kids know about what you do for a living? How much conversation with them about that?
I think they're starting to learn more about really, who I am professionally, the business that I've built, the lives that I have the opportunity to impact, every day. But I'm thinking of a funny story where this was a few years ago. So my daughter was maybe 10 or 11, where she explained to somebody that all I do is talk to people all day long, right? She doesn't know what I talk about, but that's what she thinks I do, right? I talk to people, right? But I don't think my kids truly have an appreciation for the work that we do, and the work that I do to help people, navigate the complexity of their financial lives, or now in my current role, helping entrepreneurial advisors build the businesses that they ultimately want to build. It's the only reason why I think that maybe more recently they have a little bit of a sense is that they've been able to attend more industry and company-wide events just because of where they are in life now. When they were younger, we kept them, I would always have these nice, conferences and things that families would attend, and just what appeared from my wife and I's perspective at just bad times to take them out of school. And that's probably going to be a regret that I have, down the road, to be perfectly honest with you, is that we prioritized, grades. School is always very important, whether you're doing it at home or, school is always the priority over anything else. But we were very sensitive to allowing them to miss a few days of their public school education to not go experience something that could be more meaningful, right? A conference, a trip, to expand their view of possibilities, like we spoke about earlier. My wife and I have started to kind of change our opinion on that. I think maybe COVID probably changed our opinion on that a little bit, and our appreciation or lack of appreciation for what they were maybe getting in school probably changed our opinion of that. But that was just 3-4 years ago, right? Before that, we didn't take my daughter out of school to go to a cool conference and see what dad does. And now that's starting to change. They've been around to some more company-wide events in the last couple of years, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't think they have a true appreciation for what I do on a day-to-day basis, how we help people navigate their finances and plan and build wealth. And I don't think they have a good sense of what I do now, as the principal of the firm.
I want to challenge a couple things. One is, you said that school is always important, and I want to challenge that language and say that education is always the most important, right?
Thank you.
Because school is not always giving you education. And that, you fed right into it. I could tell in the things you were saying that you agree with that sentiment. I just wanted to put the words to it, because the education that your children get on going to those conferences, on seeing what dad does, on understanding what mom and dad do, and how all of this came to be, is, to me, oftentimes that life education is way more important than whether or not you remember, the War of 1812, right? I mean, coming from a guy who wanted to be a history teacher, I threw that one at you.
I agree with you 100%.
But I mean, I'm getting ready to go speak at a conference next week in Denver, and my intent is to bring my oldest with me. My wife and I have been going back and forth, like, oh, should we do it? Should we not? Blah, blah, blah. But, I want to bring my oldest with me. He's 9. He's homeschooled. I'm not, and this was one of the biggest reasons I took them out of regular school and put them in homeschool, is my kids have now seen, not just driving through, because we drove from Florida to Texas and drove from Florida to Vermont, so they got to see a lot of states in between there. But they have spent multiple nights now in like 7 different states, six different states since starting homeschool just this year. And they would not have been able to do that if they were in regular school. So the education they got to sit there and watch dad put on his conference in San Antonio. They got to see me put on our company's conference in San Antonio, and go and like check out like real life history stuff, go walk through, the Alamo and see what's actually going on, and go walk through. We went to Philadelphia and spent a few nights in Philadelphia, and like, hey, let's see where the Declaration of Independence was written, and those types of things, like those hands-on tangible things they'll never forget. And like, oh my goodness, dad, what he's doing. He had 300 people in a room sitting there listening to him talk. That was awesome. Like, those are, to me, again, it goes back to education is by far. And I'm not trying to make this a commercial of that you should homeschool your kids by any means. But to me, that was one of the benefits. Like, who cares? Yank them out of school. I can make up plenty in the week I'm going to pull them out of school that you're not going to teach them. Like, you're not going to be able to teach half of what I teach in this week that I've got them out with me. So, I always try to encourage folks, like, drag your kids with you if you can. Don't ever let, school or your job stop you from using an opportunity to help your kids.
I really could not agree more. And the education piece and the exposure that they have to different things on the road, traveling, absolutely. But it's just the experience, right? Like, your kids have had the opportunity to see you in front of a room of 300 people, right? My kids have seen me do that in pictures, but they didn't get to stand in the back of the room and observe it. And I think that matters, right? And I applaud you for that. And that's, it's pretty cool. And I have to capitalize on the next opportunity I have to do that.
I said that specifically so you would applaud me and make me feel better. So I appreciate that. So, but it's one of those that's the looks you get sometimes when you say you homeschool is reminiscent of the looks that people used to give when like you and I were in junior high and high school, and you're like, oh, they're one of the homeschool kids, and it's like, oh man, homeschool has changed so much, like, it's ridiculous. I was just reviewing, I was just reviewing literally right before we got on this call, because I'm wanting to buy a few more things, and I'm forgetting what I'm allowed to buy with the money that Florida gives me for homeschool. I can buy my kid a brand new set of golf clubs every 2 years with the money that the state gives me for homeschool stuff. I can buy his golf lessons. I forgot that the 2 golf leagues he's in, I can actually use the homeschool stuff. So now I got to go find the receipts for that. Go turn them in. Like, I paid for all this golf stuff, and now I can get it paid for it. It's like, what the heck am I doing? So I get him, experiencing so many different things by doing this as well, and like the ability to kind of make his world. Like I've got this science stuff. Man, that's another thing I need to pay for. I've got the science project thing that comes in every month. Man, oh man, I got to write all these notes on things I need to get reimbursed by the state for. But but again, it's not like what homeschool was when we were kids.
No, and I think
again,
I said this is being recorded, so you'll be able to go back and review your notes on what you need to, what you can get reimbursed for. No, but I agree. Obviously, especially in the last 4 years, people's opinion of that path is very different. And I, it's cool that the world is changing in that way.
So now I'm gonna challenge you, throw something at you. What conversation do you want to have with your kids now that we just kind of exposed all this out? And what do you want to expose your kids to in your job that you haven't yet? Kind of what conversations do you want to start striking up at dinner or wherever to get some of this education flowing?
There's a couple of things. There's obviously bringing them around and helping to expand their view of possibilities. I have had the opportunity. We opened up a brand new office in Midtown Manhattan. At this point, my son's been there. My daughter will be there. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks, she'll take a day off from school and come with me and just kind of get to see and how I interact with so many people. Nice. How I help a lot of different people. I think bringing them to the office with some regularity is pretty cool. I opened up a small satellite office here closer to home. And I think they're keenly aware of why I did that, and they've been around and witnessed that project. We have big offices in Westchester, New York, and Midtown Manhattan. I live up in Fairfield, Connecticut, and I opened up an office during COVID for the sole purpose of I'm always going to be closer to home, but I don't want to be in the home working all the time. And my kids get that, right? So I'm around the corner. There's this really cool space that I get to go to, but it's 10 minutes away instead of an hour away. So I have been able to expose my kids to that, and they've gotten to appreciate that I've been able to design my life because of the career that I have. But with respect to specific conversations, I'm going to absolutely make sure that they appreciate the story of the start of my career, the chance that I had because I put myself out there in what was seemingly a pretty random conversation. The point is you don't know what's going to come from any particular conversation with anybody, and you don't know what the possibilities are, and any limiting thought around what could or couldn't be an opportunity is such a mistake, right? So there's that conversation, that story. But I think we can all do a better job of coaching our kids on, how personal finance works. I think that's a big thing that lacks in we come across people all the time that are seemingly successful in whatever it is that they do, and they have a real lack of understanding of how personal finance works, right? Yeah. And I think given the work that I do and the coaching that I do around how money works and mortgages and insurances and investments, my kids are getting to an age where they absolutely can start to retain some of this, and it needs to be more of a dinner table type conversation. Not necessarily, and I guess this is a debate, should it be about our finances or not, which I think is an interesting conversation, but just about how money works, right? And how economies work and how investments work and how saving for a home works, right? And how, leverage works and debt, good debt, bad debt. Those are conversations that as my kids get older, I'm certainly more inclined to share with them.
Yeah. I don't know have you heard of the game Cash Flow? Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah, it's a game called Cash Flow. Robert Kiyosaki, good dad, or Rich Dad Poor Dad. So Cash Flow is a fun game. They've got a Cash Flow Junior as well. And since my 9 and 5, right? So we play the Cash Flow Junior one, and it opens up a lot of those conversations that we can have anyways. Like, oh, remember that mortgage that you had to pay on that thing? Like that's what Daddy pays on his house, and like and we can go back and forth about all this stuff, and it brings up some fun conversations about getting out of that rat race and understanding what personal finance is. And because for me, I didn't know even what a savings account was till I got married. It was like, who saves money? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I was in the military. My parents were both Air Force, and then my dad, got a job working for the state in New York. So he got a his paycheck every 2 weeks, and that's just what you did. And then you had 2 weeks to spend it before you got another paycheck. Like, I didn't know any difference at all. Saving, like, that wasn't, I learned how to balance a checkbook in like home ec many years ago, but that was as far as that went, right? It was balancing a checkbook. And then I went and learned how to sew a pillow. So when I juxtapose those two things, okay, so both of these are useless. Got it. Like, I'm not going to, okay, I'm going to sew a pillow and balance my checkbook. Yeah, right. Okay. That's funny. Right. So but no, like I want to get my kids involved in all of that as much as possible. Teach them about business, teach them about finances, help them understand that I don't care if they go into business themselves. I don't care what they do with their life as they grow up. I mean, I do. Obviously, don't get me wrong. I don't want them to be in a gutter somewhere, but I want them to be as exposed to way more than I ever was, and that goes to what you said before when you went to college, right? Like, you were exposed to so many more different things that you didn't know. And then you're like, wow, I'm going to change my major. I'm going to change my whole idea for what I'm going to do for my life. That's what I was exposed to. So, that's where, again, that education side of the house is never stop learning, never stop growing. And that's what I'm trying to push on the kids as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
In your practice where you're at, you mentioned that you talk to a lot of people that don't really know much about the personal finance side of the house, or, on different things. So, you have a successful person coming in. How does that look for kind of growing them as a person and saying, okay, well, how do I, understand where this person comes from in a way to be able to know how we should be managing their wealth and how we should be growing that? What does that kind of path look like?
Yeah, look, so for us, our value proposition in our firm is to not necessarily promote or encourage a strategy or a idea. It's to really become a single point of contact for our clients, a little bit of a family office light, if you will, right? We often say that we are a family office type environment for people who typically can't afford to have a family office. And what does that mean? That means you've got a team of people that you're running everything through. Because what typically happens with most individuals from our perspective when we meet them, a lot of our clients are successful, as you said. They've had exposure to different advisors, wealth management folks, insurance advisors, CPA advisors, mortgage brokers, et cetera. They might have the best of all those people, but they never had the time, the energy, or the wherewithal to invite all of those people to sit around one conference room table to discuss their economy. And as a result, a lot of really smart, successful people implement smart strategies, multiple intelligent strategies that are deemed intelligent or valuable in their own silo, but on the same game board could unintentionally create conflict or unintentionally erode wealth, right? So we play a role in our clients' lives where we really have a planning process where first trust has to be built. It's a relationship business. It always has been a relationship business. It always will be a relationship business. I mean, there's always concerns around artificial intelligence taking away any of our jobs. But to me, wealth management is not a numbers and it's not an algorithm type business. Although some of the money management companies that we partner with use a lot of technology, people trust us because of our relationship. So we build a relationship. We take them through a pretty comprehensive, confidential, fact-finding type conversation where I don't care, Adam, what the quantitative data is. I care about the qualitative data of the human being, right? What makes them tick? What motivates them? What concerns them? What worries them? What keeps them up at night? What they're working towards. The numbers are the numbers. That's the easy part, right? But really getting in and appreciating the stress and anxiety they have around work or their kids or their parents or whatever it might be. We spend a great deal of time in that fact-finding, data gathering, conversation. And then we present, could be 3 or 4 strategies, could be 100 strategies, but it's really around making sure that the client's economy has what we consider structural integrity, right? Which is an engineering term, right? Structural integrity is an engineering term that we apply to personal finance that simply suggests that we need to build your world, your financial world, so that there is limited risk of collapse when the things that we can't control actually happen, right? Yeah. A financial plan can't be contingent on markets doing well, interest rates staying low, taxes staying low, me being able to work, consistently and we can't rely on things that we can't control. So we help clients build structural integrity so that their plan can be successful, no matter what they're exposed to. And when we take that authentic approach, our conversations with our clients around, should our account be getting 14% or 12% this past year, they matter a heck of a lot less. When we're coaching our clients to save money, be smart, have a plan, and it's our job to remove worry, right? And remove worry so they can sleep at night. That's the real value of an advisor from my perspective, not necessarily a rate of return.
So I'll give you, I'm going to open up a little my ignorance here. So the only advisors, quote unquote, I've ever had were like when I had, what's the word, like T. Rowe Price and stuff like that, where I was just putting my money into things, and nobody really ever advised me on anything. But I had some conversations, and nothing was ever around things like I do now, like real estate and that type of stuff. But I'm talking to a guy right now who does wealth advisory, who owns real estate and all of this stuff. So, how do you view all of those outside of the normal stock market stuff? How do you have conversations about those in balancing their decision making on whether it should be something that's outside of the market or outside of when I say the market, I mean like stocks and bonds and mutual funds, that type of stuff, versus real estate or startups or now doing things like that.
So our firm is affiliated with a broker dealer, so we can only advise and encourage our clients to use registered investments, right?
Okay.
With that said, I want to put my clients in a position when they become privy to a unique opportunity that I didn't bring to the table. We can have a conversation around whether or not exposure to that asset class or that opportunity is appropriate. I can't vet, right? So Adam, if you were my client and you said, my buddy's got the opportunity he's building condos, do you think it's a good investment? If you were asking me that, I would not be able to say I think that is or is not a good investment. Yeah. But what I would be able to say is, based on the plan that we've created, exposure to that at this level with this amount of your assets, this savings rate, et cetera, may or may not be appropriate given everything else that's going on. But so at the end of the day, my firm, myself as an advisor, we do fee-based planning occasionally. So those decisions, whether they deploy investments into assets under management with us or not, don't necessarily matter. We do generate a lot of revenue off of assets under management, where we charge a fee to oversee the management of those assets. And we do implement a reasonable amount of insurance planning every single year. But our conversations with our clients are first and foremost around making sure that they're saving, that they're properly protected, that they've got the right exposure to different types of asset classes. And that sometimes includes this investments and assets with us, and sometimes not with us. It's never siloed just to the strategy that they might be implementing with us.
Yeah, that's
really answers your question.
No, it certainly does. It certainly does, because I've always had in the back of my brain, because of the types of investments that I typically do. We've got stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and all that as well. But because of the types of investments I'm typically doing, talking to my buddy, and maybe we'll invest in this property or maybe do these things, it's always been, well, guess I got to figure it out all on my own and talk to my other buddies who are doing all of this to figure out how to vet it, or figure out how to, what makes sense for my long-term future. And I've done a terrible job of truly planning out what I want it to look like. Or I should say revamping what I wanted it to look like, the structure behind all of that, because that is something that should be done rather often. How often do you actually recommend folks, revamp what or I should say renew or refresh their financial future, like what their picture is and how they want to, where money is going and how it's flowing?
So we're in touch with our clients pretty darn regularly, and it's usually we focus with our clients, me in particular. Obviously, there's 180 advisors in my firm. We have a firm culture, we have a firm direction, but advisors may be doing, different things. My focus is less around what do we want, what should you have in the future, and more around, are we doing the best we possibly can today, right? Because I think when we get focused too much on a conversation around what am I going to need in the future, the chances of us getting that right are like slim to none, right? I joke all the time. Adam, do you remember 15 years ago, maybe, ING, which became Voya, used to have those commercials on TV where the folks were walking around with their number, right? You remember those conversations? It was like, what's your number? That was ING's commercial or marketing pitch. What's your number? I tell my clients all the time, I have no idea what your number is, right? Why? Because, I don't know how old you are, Adam, but if you're 41 like me, you're not using your money. That number is 20, 25 years off into the future. I have no idea what your little hoverboard is going to cost, right? That you're going to fly around on, right? I have no idea. I don't know what tax rates are going to be in the future. I'm willing to bet they're going to be higher than they are today, but I don't really know, right? I don't know what interest rates are going to look like, right? Even if I was having a conversation with somebody who retired, 10, 15 years ago, or if I was having a conversation with somebody 10, 15 years ago about retiring today, I don't know what all their devices cost to be connected to the internet. We never would have planned for that, right? So rather than trying to figure out what the number is, let's optimize what it is that you can do today around saving, around making sure that you own the right types of assets that are going to allow you to extract the most benefit and value from from the assets that you do accumulate. And that's why we focus so much more on savings rate than rate of return, right? I believe strongly that the rate at which we save is more important than the rate that we get on our investments that are currently on the balance sheet, right? Because we can control it. Yeah. And to hit pause for a second, not on your recording, but to hit pause on that story, because that's my why, right? My why in life that I apply to how I parent, how I coach, how I interact with friends, etc., is essentially the more responsibility we take, personal responsibility we take in any situation, any relationship, the more satisfied we're going to be with the ultimate outcome, right? If we expect others or other circumstances or other to dictate how things are going to go, we're only going to be left disappointed. The more responsibility that we take on that is reasonably appropriate, the better the experience is going to be. It's not, marriage isn't 50-50. It's 100% on me when I'm in those conversations, right? So that's my why. And how do I apply it to business and planning for my clients? Like, let's not rely on things that we can't control. I don't know when the Fed's going to lower rates. I don't know what the market's going to do. I'm going to focus on the things that you can control that are going to give you the best odds for success, limit the impact of the things that you can't control, right? And block out those externalities as much as possible. So I'm always promoting personal responsibility as much as possible. And I think it applies to parenting. It applies to finance. It certainly applies to my politics, which is a different podcast, but right. But you probably know where I'm coming from.
No, yeah, I love it. Yeah, and the beauty about this podcast is it can be this podcast if you wanted it to be, because we'll go wherever the heck we want to go. But no, I think, and that's one thing that the language we use around personal responsibility is extremely important, especially around our kids, because we can use it in a way that sounds blaming, and we could do the same thing to ourselves, like, oh, it's all my fault that this happened. And it's like, okay, well, was it actually your fault? What did you do in this situation, right? Like, because personal responsibility could mean that the words I say are, it's my fault, but that doesn't mean that it is your fault, right? So it's like, how do we use this? But man, I love the thought process on these are the things you can control. This is what you're responsible for, is your actions. And you said it before, the two things that you talk to your kids about. I got it somewhere in one of my notes. Like the things you can control, the two things you control. Where's it at? Your attitude and your effort, I think, is the two things that you wrote down, right? So the two things you control is your attitude and your effort. And the same thing in your business, the same thing in your finances, the same thing in everything. So controlling those aspects, that's what I bring to the table. My attitude behind it and the effort I put behind it. If my attitude is crappy, my effort's probably going to be crappy too, So it is what it is. It's like my son was golfing the other day. on a little junior pro-am golf thing where he got to golf with a Corn Ferry Tour golfer, him and two other 9-year-olds. So they were a foursome out there playing, and he was just beating himself up the first like 2 holes. Like his first drive was just not what he wanted it to be. So he was beating himself up the entire time. Like, I'm a terrible golfer. I'm like, all these kids are way better than me. I'm like, well, first off, that guy's like a 32-year-old, like, that gets paid to do this. So yes, he's better than you, right? But secondly, we don't know. Those 2 kids may be terrible. They just had good drives. We don't like, and does it really matter? Like, let's put in your effort. Let's go and do your thing. And then the second he started having fun and realizing like his attitude changed his game, he was like, whoa, I started having fun and my game became so much better. I'm like, what do you know? When your attitude's crappy, the effort you put in is not going to be great either, right? Because even right here in your backswing, you're going to be telling yourself, this could be another bad shot. So what are you going to do? You're going to hit a bad shot. Like, there's no way around it. Like, and there's nothing you can do about that. And if I'm doing that with my investments, I'm going to put in a bad investment over here. So, it really doesn't matter what I do with my money. Well, yes, it does matter what you do with your money. Like, you do affect it. You control it.
And that with respect to personal finance, I mean, we need to, it's our job as advisors and coaches, because you can get great investments on your own through the AIs, the self-directed, right? But our value proposition with respect to the implementation of investments is to remove the emotion from those decisions, right? Because people do get in their head. They see things go down. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And when you start doing that, you're so inclined, you're naturally inclined to just buy and sell at the wrong time, right? Yeah. So it's our job to be coaching and to remove emotion, as much as possible. You mentioned golf. You mentioned the head stuff. Have you caught the Full Swing episode?
Yes.
How phenomenal! I have not watched all of the episodes, but I did download a few for our flight down to Savannah last week, and I did catch the episode that Wyndham Clark and then the other golfer who I was not as familiar with, because I didn't watch season 1. I guess he was the star of season 1. But just what's going on in their head and where their careers are at. It's just fascinating.
Yeah. I was talking to my wife because I want to show that to my son. There's a whole lot of F-bombs dropped on that episode. So I told my wife, I said, all right, how comfortable are you with this level of exposure? But she understands. And I've told my kids, especially my 9-year-old, he's like, is there a lot of language on that one? I said, have words ever hurt you before? Like, if we're like, I don't care what you hear. I care what you say. I care where your heart's at. I don't care what you hear. You're going to hear all sorts of things in this world. It really doesn't matter. But anyways, that's a completely side story. But yeah, like the mindset game that they had, the way that they played the game, the way they went about how they thought about the game completely changed and you're like the third person that told me, like, this is something that you need to talk to your son about, but it's so true. And I loved that episode. The second I saw that episode, there's that one. And then in season 1, they talked to Rory a lot on an episode. It's called Golf is Hard. And my son seems to think that it should be the easiest thing in the world because, well, I've hit a 200-yard drive before. Why don't I hit a 200-yard drive every time? Right. Like, because golf's not easy. Golf is hard. Like, that's why you don't hit a 200-yard drive every time, buddy. You're 9 years old. You're not going to hit a 200-yard drive every time. But those 2 episodes are 2 I really want to expose him to. My mindfulness, mindset, coaching, that's something that I did not really embrace early on in my career. And I was never exposed to it as a kid. Right. But later on, more recently, let's just say the last 10 years or so, how we think and our mindset, and it changes everything. Paul Malella, again, one of your previous podcast guests, he's my coach because he works on my mind, right? I thought forever building a wealth management business simply meant more clients, wealthier clients, improve my skill, right? And those 3 things are important. That's kind of our inventory and our skill and our conversion ratios, et cetera, right? Like any other business, those things are important. But how I thought about who I was and how I was showing up, and Paul helped tap into the confidence I think my father gave me as a young guy. Paul was able to pull it out years later in helping me appreciate what my business could become, the leader I was in my organization, the leader I could become in my community. It's all about mindset coaching. And we try to expose our kids to that now, right? There's
I think it's The Mindful Athlete is a book that my daughter's reading right now. That one of her coaches turned her on to. Visualization, and it's so empowering. It's so empowering to stay in a good headspace in any endeavor, whether you're coming off a bad shot on the golf course or showing up to a tryout. Having the right mindset is really important.
For sure. So I'm definitely the mindful athlete. I'm gonna have to look that up when we're done with this. Mindfulness and mindset. What kind of conversations do you have with your kids about those two specific things? Right. I mean, you said you've been working on it probably the last decade. So kind of, what has that turned into for how you're parenting your kiddos?
Look, I think I've definitely taken the approach of trying to never limit their possibilities, right? Like, I think, and limit their mindset at all, in the sense that, I can think of a particular story where, my son wanted to go shoot hockey pucks in the basement one morning before school, and he had not completed his homework, which he had to complete before he got on the bus, because of my kid's current education system, which we already talked about. But so my wife had some rules around what he could do, and in that moment, she said to him, "You're not going to be in the NHL." And then he said, I can remember a conversation later that night where my son said, and this is the way he framed it, which I thought was interesting: "Is there anybody playing in the NHL now whose mom told them that they couldn't or wouldn't?"
Ooh.
And I was like, just the way he framed that, like he was thinking that far forward, like not like he could have said, "Do you think I can play in the NHL?" But he said, "Is there anybody playing in the NHL now whose mom told them that they weren't going to play in the NHL?" And I'm like, wow. Like, I didn't even know how to react to that. But my wife and I had a pretty, moving conversation about it, where it's like, look, he's 10 years old. He's not that skilled. He's not the best 10-year-old on his team. He's not the best 10-year-old in the league. He's not destined for the NHL. But what harm is there in letting a kid dream and believe and things still need to happen in order. We're not going to sacrifice education for hockey, right? But I think there's different ways to frame it, and to keep them, working hard, and to keep their dreams alive, and to promote just a sense of unlimited possibilities. That's the approach that I think I take in that respect, because it's interesting the way kids think.
For sure. So I want to dig in a little on the personal side. What was that conversation like between you and your wife after that, and after your son asked that question?
I just shared with her the story, and I think she felt bad in the moment, right? Because of the way he interpreted it, right?
Okay.
And she was, and we did not have an intense conversation. It was just like, listen, we are fully, managing expectations here. Chances of him playing in the NHL are like zero, right?
Yeah.
But like, do we want to be the parents that encourage or discourage, right? Dreams. And I thought it was a pretty, meaningful conversation, an important conversation that, cause her and I always talk that we didn't have, I had a very encouraging and encouraging father, encouraging mother. They instilled confidence in us. Like, with the resources that we have now to give our kids, like, what's possible,
Yeah.
My son, this morning, he didn't, because he had some testing at school that he had to do. But usually on Thursdays, he goes and skates with a couple teammates before school with a coach. And it's awesome. I never had that opportunity. Right?
Yeah, no kidding.
So my wife and I always say, like, what could have been possible? My wife played Division I college soccer, right? Without any of the private lessons, without any of the extra coaching, what could have been possible? So I don't think that we do our kids, I think we do a greater disservice discouraging dreams to create reality, right? At the expense of dreams, we try to create a reality for them that is probably accurate. I think that can do more damage than having a kid reach for the stars and come up short.
Yeah.
That's kind of our belief. And that conversation with my wife after that event, confirmed that we're on the same page. And now we'll be more choosy and careful around our language.
And I'm going to tell you this, not to say anything negative about your son by any stretch. There was a kid I went to high school with, not the greatest hockey player at all. He ended up on the NHL because he was a goon, right? So he was picked up basically because he was a goon. And we don't, that's not the way you want to get picked up for the NHL, but he made it to the NHL by not being all that great. But yeah. His brother actually was seemed to me a better hockey player from my perspective. I'm not a hockey player, but he was only in and out of the NHL. He was up and down, but his brother, been playing for a while. So
yeah, it's all about timing and circumstances and chance.
Timing, what a team needs at that moment, and maybe what conversation you had in the bathroom with somebody beforehand. Because those types of things happen. You never daggum know. But man, the sport side of the house, that's been a common theme in our conversations thus far. What kind of role do you think sports had in you and your wife's upbringing that have now applied for you in both business and in fatherhood?
I think life is a team sport. I really do. Or sports in general, right? Even if it is a sport like golf or tennis or swimming, where we're, kind of competing on our own, you're going to be faced with a lot of adversity, right? And you're going to have to figure out a way to overcome it. You're going to have to decide who you want to be in an environment. And I think we learn so much as kids playing sports. I didn't play any individual sports, so I think a lot about team sports. I think about the fact that our household is a team, right? My wife and I are partners. We got a couple kids, right? That's a team environment. My work is clearly a team environment. The advisors, not all of our advisors run and build and operate teams, but in my mind, the advisors that are having a lot of fun and growing and pushing each other and excelling, a lot of those advisors exist on teams, right? So, one of my charges in our organization is to build and develop and grow a team environment, because I think it's best for our advisors and it's best for our clients when they have the service model of a team versus an individual advisor. Playing team sports, my entire life, I think taught me a ton around how to deal with different personalities, how to come together and work with somebody who maybe had, towards a common goal, who is somebody who I wouldn't necessarily gel with in a different environment. Right. I think there's a lot to learn there. And I feel like, the business that I'm in, this wealth management business, is, I would just say, in an entrepreneurial business, whether it's real estate, whether it's wealth management, anything where you have the opportunity to build based on your own efforts, is one of the last few meritocracies that exist, right? If when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a business owner, when you're building a business like you are in an environment like this, right? Because, I think as a society, we face a lot of pressures right now, or a lot of people face different pressures in different organizations and different environments, where they're going to be passed over just because of who they are and what they look like and what their background is, which is terribly unfortunate, right? Yeah. But if you're an entrepreneur and you're building your own business, whether you succeed or fail is often on you, right? Maybe that goes back to my why. But I think in sports, it's much of the same. The higher up you go, right? I think there's a lot of unfortunate politics and things like that in youth sports that we do our best to avoid. But at the end of the day, your son that's playing golf, that might enter in tournaments that have cuts, it's on him whether he made the cut or didn't make the cut, right? And I think learning those lessons, playing sports as kids is so valuable, and will translate into business and will translate into entrepreneurship, later on in life. And I think that's why we promote it and we encourage it in our house. Some people think we're crazy with the amount of sports that our kids play. People roll their eyes all the time. My son has a hockey game tomorrow. He doesn't usually play hockey in April. He'll play 2 spring tournaments, but he does have a hockey tournament this weekend. And between lacrosse, this spring tournament, and my daughter's soccer, and my son will have 1 soccer game, we might have as many as 9 games this weekend, 2 kids. And people think we're crazy. We need to enlist help from grandparents to help shuffle things around. But again, going back to how I was raised, and my wife was raised very similarly, and this is a perfect weekend in our house, right? plans are set. We're going to be together. We're going to be on the road. We're going to be traveling. We're going to be, we're going to win some. We're going to lose some. And we would not want to spend this weekend, which is going to be gorgeous here in Connecticut, any other way.
Yeah. And I think that goes to, again, not caring what other people think, right? If this is what's best for you and your family, enjoy the heck out of it. Like, have a blast, do all the traveling. Do I think it's thrilling sometimes to drive an hour and 20 minutes for a golf match? No. But guess what? When I'm there, it's amazing. I absolutely love it, especially like some of the Under Armour ones we do. I get to wear my little caddy vest. It's got his name on the back of it. So it's like, no, like, I love this. Like, what better way to spend, 4 hours than, walking around a golf course with my son, where I get to have amazing conversations, and what better ways do you have than to say, hey, like, in between these games or, in between periods, look, son, this is what's going on, how this was going on. Who's some other family to be able to tell us what works for their family versus our family, and
for sure.
Whatever. Same thing I look at with my business. Okay, your business is different than my business. Okay, does it there are some principles that all families I think should stick to, and there are some principles that all businesses should probably stick to.
But
when it comes down to it, like, each family and each business is going to be different. Go out and have some fun and learn what you need to do and enjoy it. But
that's right.
But Jerry, I want to pass it over to you as we're getting close to kind of wrapping up. What, if anything, is there anything that you definitely wanted to chat about while we were here that we just didn't get to in the conversation, or is there anything that you wanted to throw out there that we haven't covered yet?
No, I'm so glad that we talked about my father, because he definitely impacted my life in so many ways. My mom did as well. The relationship that I have with my father is one that I'm really trying to replicate with my son. I didn't get a chance to say this when talking about my father. My father was the best man in my wedding. So, we always had a really close relationship. We still do. And I tell my son, and my dad told me every single day that when I was a kid, that I was his best friend. My father lost his actual best friend on Christmas Day, 3 months after I was born in 1982. And he told me, I think every day after that I was his best friend. And I try to do the same thing with my son and my daughter, right? You're my best friend. I love you. I'm here for you. My goal is for my kids to want to hang out with me when they're adults, right? That we have such a good relationship that they want to be around. I just had coming off a fantastic vacation with my dad and my sisters and my kids. That's exactly how I want to spend vacation, right? It's unfortunately, my wife and I don't get away for a lot of vacations on our own, but that's because we love being around our parents and we love seeing our kids with our parents. I told you my dad's birthday was yesterday. Tomorrow night, we're going to a beer garden, right, with some live music, nice. and I'll be hanging with him and his friends, and we're all very close. So my ultimate goal here is that my kids view me as obviously a parent that they respect, that they can look up to, but also as a friend. And with respect to this podcast, that's the message that I want to get out.
No, I'm glad you we're wrapping up on that, because obviously it's called the Biz Dad Podcast. I talk about family constantly, but I cannot express enough how important it is for that family to happen. And I always want to ask about people's dads, even if they had a terrible relationship with their dad, because understanding who our dads are and where they came from can completely change the way that we view our life and can change the way that we parent our kids. And hopefully in the positive way, if our mindset is set correctly on that. My dad, I've gotten closer and closer to him. The more I learned about him and the more I understood who he was, the older I got, and understood what he went through. So, it's just one of those that, if I can pass that gift on to, at least one other person who says, you know what, maybe I should start that conversation with my dad. Maybe I should understand his perspective. Maybe I should connect one more time with him. I think that it's well worth the effort. I love when I talk to gentlemen like you who are still close with their dad, have always been close with their dad. But I'm hoping that type of conversation doesn't, shy people away from reaching out to their dad who they weren't close to, because man, oh man, like having that relationship, watching my dad with his grandkids, is something like there's only been 2 times I've ever seen my dad cry. One was at his mom's funeral. And one was when his only son, me, had his first son, my son Adam, and that was the only 2 times I've ever seen my dad cry. And now watching him with my with his my 3 kids running around. Like, it's just a life-changing experience. And I can't wait to, it makes me excited to be a grandpa, and hopefully that is still years away, but it makes me excited to be a grandpa, right? I cannot wait for that moment. But thank you so very much, Jerry, for jumping on. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you, getting to know a little bit more of your story and understanding who you are and where you came from. If somebody heard something that you said and they really want to just kind of reach out and connect with you in one way, shape, or form, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, we'll make sure to post my LinkedIn page so that you have all my contact information. Would love to talk about my career, how we help our clients. If it's not me, it's one of the advisors in our organization can certainly chat. But yeah, Adam, this was a pleasure. This was so much fun. Exceeded my expectations. It was really great to chat with you. I enjoyed it, and I'm honored to have had the opportunity and the invitation to join you.
No, it was an absolute blast. Thank you very much. So for everybody listening, thank you for listening. We greatly appreciate you hanging out with us for the last hour and a half. Please reach out to Jerry. Obviously you're going to hear his heart in the conversations we just had. So, if that's something that you connect with, please reach out to Jerry. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. Please like, subscribe, all of that stuff that you're supposed to do. Also make some comments. Like, please add some comments wherever you listen. Add some reviews, 5 stars, please. Like, none of that 1-star nonsense. We don't need any of those, but all the 5-star reviews you can do. Thank you again, Jerry. Thank you for listening, and we will see everybody on the next show.